So yesterday I did some meditation, some yoga, and throughout the day and a little bit beyond the day and in dreams, I've been kind of lifting and playing a little bit with the heaviness here. And I think one of the fulcrums in looking at this dynamic between the heaviness and the lightness, the darkness and the humor, the pain and the joy, is intention. Another is the belief, is reality good or is reality bad? And when reality is bad, in a paradigm in which the bad deserves to be punished. Now, this is the Christian ethic. So in Christianity, Lucifer is an angel that diverges from his father, from his parent, and has his own ideas. And for this, he is cast out of the garden, and he is condemned, he is punished. So Lucifer does something bad by disobeying his father, and he's thrown out of heaven to be punished because he did something bad. And then anyone who copies Lucifer, who leaves the garden, is also bad and deserves to be punished. And this story played heavily in the Colby family. Michael would read the Old Testament, and he would pretend to be God. And God was always very punishing. He was all-powerful, all-knowing. He certainly wasn't all loving. He was all punishing, all testing, all conniving, all revenging. And none of this was put together, but there is a consistency between a sociopathic government that uses force, that uses tricks, that uses... it's very much like the Old Testament God. I mean, if you look at the NSA and CIA and various agencies, don't they try to be all-knowing? Breaking the law to spy on American phone calls, breaking the law to gather everyone's emails, breaking the law to spy on allies and friends around the world, as well as enemies, punishing journalists for telling the truth. So you have the government, and then you have your parents breaking the law. Sherilyn would say, no food before this, no sneaking, no this. And then Sherilyn would be caught, by me at different ages, breaking the law. She's sneaking sweets. She's doing this. She's not doing that. And in government, if you look at the psychology and the fractal pattern of what goes on in Washington, you have I won't tell if you won't tell type of mentality for those in power. It's no different than Sherilyn telling a young child, don't tell your brothers and sisters. I'll share some of the illicit, the illicit booty with you. And, the government and people make the law, and then the government and people break the law that they make. The parent makes the law and then breaks the law that they make. And God, says, thou shalt not kill, but kills more people apparently than any human being. Thou shalt not kill is the key. Not I shall not kill. Thou shall not kill. And you get the thing, don't question your parents. Don't question the cult. Don't question God. Don't question the Pope or the figurehead of God. So there's a pattern established in the mythology that said that the angel who disobeyed God, who is right there in the text, killing people, punishing people, abandoning people, testing people, being a complete dick at a highly sociopathic level. You want a good definition of a highly sociopathic, paranoid, domineering father in a chauvinistic paradigm. God doesn't even have a wife. That would associate him with the weaker side. So you have all the cult chauvinism going into this dynamic, and so we have this constellation of personas in the child that has to relate to this different dynamic at different scales. So if you offend dad, he hits you. If you offend mom, she hits you. Well, he and she are the smallest God. If you offend the teachers, they punish, shame, sometimes hit you, and shout at you. And then if you offend the government, they do that. And if you offend or do anything your peers can attack you for, they do. And then you come to, the mythological God, and he is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-doing, and in practical terms, all-punishing. Even the story of sending a son, because in chauvinism, if you sent a daughter, that wouldn't be very important. But if you send a son, well, that's more important than a daughter. And then chauvinism is about singularity, because you have the ecology and then you have the individual. And the individual is the particle, the masculine expression of reality, and the field, the ecology, is the feminine circle expression of the field. And so in that dynamic, God is sending his only son, so as chauvinistic as it gets. And you also have the sociopathic nature, because God is not sacrificing himself. Dad isn't going out and taking the hit. Dad's saying, go on, son, you go do it. Go suffer for my mistakes, because I created someone in my image. And because I'm fucked up, what I've created in my image is fucked up because it's created in my image. Now, I could try and fix that, but I don't want to deal with that. So go on, son. You go deal with it. Go down there, you'll be crucified. But maybe some good will come of it. And so God was so loving that he set his only son out to take the fall for his incompetence. And you wonder, no wonder we look at our parents as God. You go deal with this child. You think of the dynamic, the ritual of sending the child off to school. Any intelligent parent knows that school is a shithole, knows that you don't learn a tremendous amount of useful stuff in large instances. Now, If you understand that school is absolute agony and misery, and you understand that it's not terribly useful, meaning if you took the average high school education, let's say that an American child spends $6,000 of public money funding public education. If you took that $6,000 of public money and invested it in the markets, starting at age 5, $5,000 for the 5-year-old, $5,000 for the 6-year-old, $5,000 for the 7-year-old, and you just put this into an IRA, which is a tax-free instrument, that child is a millionaire before they graduate. Now, if the child can effectively retire before they finish school with the exact same amount of money that is supposedly preparing them for the workplace, then what's this about? So it doesn't really make sense, because the cult tells you that it's all about making money, and whoever makes the most money is the most valuable person. And we'll make a list. It's called the Forbes 400 list. And if you can get on that list, it means you're a very important person. Not because you're a person, but because you have money. In other words, what makes you important or not is how much money you have, not the fact that you are a person or who you are as a person, because there will be no list of the kindest people, of the most effective parents, and so you have all that dynamic. So even at the most basic level that a 10-year-old could ration through, think through and say, what's going on here? This is not rational. If the whole purpose of all this nonsense and misery at school is so that I won't stay at home and depend on mom and dad, then please just put the money into a tax-free instrument of growth, even an index fund for that matter. And by the time I'm 20 or 30, etc., I'll get along just fine. So, but that's of course not what's being done. We're actually asking our children, once they finish being publicly funded into trauma and misery, we then ask them to go on to college and spend often, if you're really lucky, you'll get to go to an Ivy League college, and then you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in personal funds and debt, which again, if you put hundreds of thousands of dollars in personal funds into investment vehicles, then statistically speaking, you will be happier, more independent. You can focus more on the things that you want to do because you have your own income, independent income. And something a little bit similar goes on in Denmark, where because you've got a strong social safety net, people do go to school. They actually get paid to go to school. But they come out of school focusing on what they're really interested in, because they're not kicked out on the street if they don't get a job immediately, and then afraid of losing their job because what if it didn't work out? And so they actually do things that they like doing, and thus they do them very well. So there's a lot that we could learn from a place like Denmark. But of course, a chauvinistic country, part of chauvinistic thinking is either or. It's this or it's this. It can't be both. There can't be 10, 20 ways to drive to New York City. You could hop on a plane. No. There's only one way. And it's, of course, nonsense, but all chauvinism is nonsense, which is why it's so disturbing that the cult perpetuates the teaching of such nonsense. Either way, if we go back to age 5, we can see the one that feels bad for breaking the rules of mom and dad, but who also feels hurt and resentful that the giants, that the parents do not feel bad for breaking their own rules. They lie, they steal, they are hypocritical, they're lazy, and they eat sweets before dinner, and they don't eat things they don't like. And they have sexual affairs. And they're not terribly Christian, and they enjoy suffering, and they enjoy tormenting their children, which I guess could be Christian, because God apparently set the whole drama up with creating imperfect people in his own image, then punishing them for being like him, being imperfect, and then telling his son to go fix his problem by being crucified by the imperfect people that God created, and then make everyone feel guilty for the rest of their life for all the woe and sacrifice of God. It just sounds like a Jewish parent, woe is me, I did all this for you. It's complete, martyrhood and suffering. But it's ultimately what's asked is that the children, everyone else has to suffer listening to that, which of course we did. And so you have the feeling of being bad, the resentment of the unfairness, because it isn't fair. It's sociopathic abuse. And the expectation of being punished. And the expectation of being punished was absolute terror, terrifying. Now, the terror is the synergy, the coming together of the fear of being hit, which for a highly sensitive child, to be hit by a giant is absolutely terrifying. To an empathic child, to realize how scared your parents are of you is terrifying, because it reinforces this sense that I must be bad. If my parents are that scared of my feelings, I must be bad. And I've got to stop being me. Being me could get me killed because it's so upsetting to my parents, because I must be bad. So there's this incredible tightness. And I've had it in my low back, in my tailbone, my entire life, this clenching, waiting to be hit, waiting to be hurt, terrified of being bad. It's absolute terror. And the idea of God looking down at me and seeing me as a bad child, the idea that everything that I want to do that is my own thing, my own independent things, is taboo, is bad, creates this incredible constriction on breath, on blood, on spontaneity, on life. And we see the first kind of grit, the first mold of depression. The fear of living spontaneously, the fear of being spontaneous, The belief that I must be bad, because if you can imagine what it's like to be an infant, dependent, completely dependent on giants, regardless of their caliber, their training, their humanity, what it's like to be an infant. You depend on the giants for survival, for security, for some sense of acceptance in some role called love and belonging. It doesn't necessarily need to be love and belonging, but it has to be a role that fills the gap of what could be love and belonging. And then it doesn't necessarily have to be self-esteem, but it has to be outside validation. You get validated, a smile, a this, which gives you increased survival and security. Because if your parents don't want you to live, you don't live. Or it's tough. If your cult, if your community doesn't want you to live, you don't live, it's tough. And what if God doesn't want you to live? What if your parents identify and associate and establish the high ground of saying, we're God, and we don't want you to live? We're the representative of God, we're the church, and we don't want you to live. It's an absolutely terrifying situation. And, this clenching, waiting to be hit physically, trying to figure out and become who it was and understand who is it that these parents are frightened of. Of course, emotionally illiterate, traumatized parents are most frightened of their own feelings. And children bring up because parents feel a lot of attachment to, and also parents in our culture are judged. The cult never judges itself, because for responsible adults to look at two incompetent parents. So this is what happens currently. The cult raises two incompetent parents by, surprise, surprise, incompetent parents raised by the cult. So an incompetent cult with no emotional literacy, with no psychological literacy, with no traumatic literacy, raises, surprise, surprise, incompetent parents with no psychological literacy, no parental literacy, no traumatic literacy. These parents shame, punish, traumatize their children. They also pass on any intergenerational diseases to the children. And surprise, surprise, the children demonstrate symptoms of trauma, symptoms of PTSD, symptoms of compulsion, all kinds of suffering is then expressed in the child. Now, the cult also has rules that you're a good person if you smile and are happy and pretend and say please and thank you and all this. So the cult has these rules. Well, traumatized, frightened, emotionally illiterate children don't tend to feel happy. If they're honest and not completely sociopathic, they don't tend to smile while they're suffering and being afraid of being hit and all that. So in the epitome of hypocrisy and irresponsibility, what the cult does is say, tisk, tisk, tisk. Look at that misbehaved child. Those parents are no good. They're bad parents. You see, and in the paradigm of Christianity, or at least the Old Testament, although it's a mixed bag to say the least, but anyway, in the Christian paradigm, if you're bad, God burns you alive for eternity in a horrible place that has as its sole purpose to torture you for all eternity. There's a nice story for you. All eternity. God doesn't have any remorse. Like, they've suffered enough. I've burnt them alive for 500 million years. Surely I can let it go. Take a deep breath, God. Let it go. People can change. You're not so fucked up, God, that your creations are doomed for all eternity. God, you could be redeemed. You see, because when people are created in God's image, when the Son is created in the parent's image, the fact that the Son is fucked up in the eyes of the cult, in other words, the fact that the Son is a scapegoat for the fucked up protocols of the cult. Now, if you teach parental literacy before people are parents, parenting improves. If you teach emotional literacy to children in high school students, their relationships and their relationship with feelings improve. If you teach relational literacy to parents and children in school, relationships improve with self and with others and with the environment. If you teach traumatic literacy, trauma and PTSD goes down, and trauma repair goes up, and with that empathy goes up, and sociopathic reptilian behavior goes down. But that requires the cult to change. You see, and the cult is a coward. The cult is the majority. And the majority cult is irresponsible, lazy, ineffective, dysfunctional. The cult is flawed. But the cult never punishes itself because the cult is a hypocrite. You see, Sherilyn never slapped herself for stealing a cookie before dinner. She just tried to make sure that none of the children caught her stealing the cookie before dinner. But oh, was she righteous and indignant when one of the little ones, a 5-year-old, does exactly what she does. You bad and horrible person, this and that and the other. You see, but Mom didn't ever hit herself and say she was a bad and horrible person. And God doesn't hit himself and say, what a fucked up idiot I am. I created all these imperfect humans. Then I'm surprised that they're not perfect. Then I blame them for being my creation. And then I punish them for my mistake for all eternity with no forgiveness. And I call sending my only son to be nailed to a cross, I call that, that's my remedy. Send my other children. So my first children, I'm already punishing and doing this and that and the other. Then I send my other children to fix my mistake. And then watch and let them be nailed to a cross. And what does it say about God? He's fucked up. What does it say about Mom and Dad? They're fucked up. But it's the child that gets the slap and the sent to the room and the message, don't ever do this again, you're bad. It's utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense. But the terror is real and understandable. And the acting out of that terror. So one of the things, from all this tension and holding, at some point, I'd have to take a break and relax. So there's exhaustion, etc. But there's also hyperactivity to try and avoid the feelings. Now, the cult looks at the parents and say, you fucked up parents. What are you doing with these children? Why aren't your children behaving? And so the parents are afraid of the children making them look bad. They're afraid of being ostracized in a dysfunctional cult. You see, in a functional cult, there are adults, and there are leaders, and there are mentors. And the leaders say, my bad, you're in our cult, and you're a dysfunctional, shame-based, emotionally illiterate parent with PTSD who we've enabled to take care of a small infant you don't have the skill to take care of. My bad. I'm an elder. I'm an adult. We apologize to you. We raised you, and we fucked up. We apologize to you. We made mistakes. And because we made mistakes, you're making mistakes because you're copying us. You are parentally illiterate parents. We're sorry to you. Of course you made mistakes. Who wouldn't? You were raised with us, and we didn't have a clue what we're doing. Now, we picked as a deity someone who doesn't have a clue what they're doing. We chose a deity that was all-knowing. But knowing that human beings were imperfect, he created imperfect human beings and then punished them for his choice to create imperfect human beings. That's the God we believe in. That's no God. That's a fucked up moron. And we need to do our work to pick and believe in a God that has some intelligence. And, you know, it's interesting that iteration is basically condemned by the Christian ethic, because if you look at evolution, you look at the healthy development of a normal, healthy child. The first stage is sympathy. The child will learn any language you talk in front of it, will eat any food you eat in front of it. You have sympathy, a yes, an unconditional, unconscious acceptance of what is. As you move into adolescence, you move into antipathy. Rebellion. That's fucked up, that's fucked up, I have a better way here, I'm not doing that. You morons, you're unfair here, you're unfair there. You move into antipathy. Now this is life. It's life. If you look at life's program of creating something out of nothing for billions upon billions of years, that's life basically. Life creates something out of nothing. You ask a scientist, where did the world come from? Well, there was a big bang. Poof! It's magic, right? And then a whole universe is created from less than the size of a pea. And poof! This little something out of nothing. Something was nothing, and there was something for no particular reason. Poof! And life, starting at that moment, where there was less than the size of the pea, what has life been doing, right? I mean, you got to hand it to her. She created multiple universes, the whole solar system, over 1 billion planets capable of sustaining life, as we call life. And life created every species known to be, platypuses, birds, out of this. Now, that's a pretty successful program. Life out of this? You'd have to hand it to life. Like if I gave you a bunch of clay this big and said, here's a bit of clay this big. Now I want you to create a human being. Could you manage one human being before you died? And that's with all your evolutionary intelligence, which was given to you by life. It'd be tough to turn something the size of a pea into one human being, let alone an entire universe. Life is a winner. Life is expansive, creative, generative, magnificent. Life created 1 billion life-affirming planets out of something less than the size of a pea. You just give life some time. You see? And life has endless time available. You have to look at you and be, I don't have enough time. Life has enough time. Life has so much time, she gave some to you, and still has enough. We say, oh, the planet's burning up. Da, da, da. Life isn't. You see, if every human being on this planet set off a nuclear bomb and destroyed their whole area of the planet, and just wiped it out, the kind of way that good Christians would drop on Nagasaki and stuff to teach them a lesson, because we're the new God, right? We've got to follow in God's image. He destroyed the whole planet with a flood because, people weren't listening to him? He wasn't getting enough attention? He destroyed the whole planet. We're just going to destroy a city because we're the righteous ones acting in God's image. You envelop the entire planet in nuclear holocaust. Thousands of warheads, Russians, Americans, everything imaginable. Okay, so we're all dead. Poor God, fucked up again, created dysfunctional humans, killed themselves. Oh, poor God. No one to sing his praises any longer. Poor Dad. And so then, does life give up? You think life says, let's throw in the towel. I've only created a multiverse, 1 billion other planets capable of life, all out of the size of a pea. And I've only been going for 20 billion years? It's nothing for life. Give life a few trillion years. A few trillion years for life. A few trillion years. So if life is able to create this planet out of nothing in 20 billion years, you don't think life can bring this planet back to life after we destroy ourselves? Of course it can. Even if we split the entire Earth in two, into billions of people drilled in, blew up the whole planet, put all our nuclear warheads in the center of the Earth, blew the Earth apart. All these pieces scattering around. You don't think gravity would pull those pieces back together again? Pulled together all kinds of stuff for the planets. In only 20 billion years. Only 20 billion. But life has endless amount of time. You see, life has given birth to the human species amongst billions and billions of other species on this planet alone, in this universe alone, in this galaxy alone. Billions of possibilities. Well, life can certainly repair and regenerate and maybe do a better job through iteration. But what life's protocol, the way life creates more and more out of nothing, is through mutation, diversity, iteration, and evolution. And what life's protocol is to put out a bunch of patterns of energy and then see how they relate together. And many die off. Life sends out a dandelion seed. 1,000 dandelion seeds go all around the neighborhood and all this. And some of the seeds find good soil and grow into dandelions. And others of them, nothing, dead. Now, within about 10 or 20% of those dandelion seeds are very slight mutations. They're rebellions. They're antitheses. They're not a perfect copy. And this is life's secret to evolution. Lots of it and imperfection. You see, because if God had created, well, you could actually say God did. The definition of the Old Testament God is a violent, sociopathic, chauvinistic. He doesn't even have a wife, let alone treat her as an equal. Chauvinistic, violent hypocrite who takes no responsibility for his mistakes and punishes his victims. Well, there you go. That's our Western chauvinistic cult right there. And so, God did create someone, in their image. And it's not but you have to understand that this projection of Psyche into mythology is just one of 10,000. Anthropologists will say that life gave birth to not just the human species, but to 10,000 cults over the history of humanity. And in those 10,000 cults, of course, every single one of them knew they were right. The Bimbu in 1847, who believed in the rainbow god and the serpent created the earth and this, the Bimbu absolutely were right. Just ask the Bimbu, is your cult right? Oh yes, it's the only way to do things. What about all these other cults out there? The Christians, well, they're fools. They're not right. We're right. You're not right. So, and of course, God never admits to making mistakes. So, people wouldn't either if they're created in their image. Or, more accurately, if God is created in the image of the archetypal ideals of a given cult, then God would contain all the imperfections of the asymmetrical composition of archetypal ideals. And if you think of deification, it's a useful strategy. You look at the current deification of, I guess it's under siege or shifting somewhat. But, for some thousands of years, tall, muscular, sociopathic, warrior men were deified. And you say, why? If you're taller, you have to eat more, maybe you fall down. What's the big deal about this? Why do people bow down to the tall warrior? Well, at a time of learning a relationship with an uncertain and an unknown ecology with lots of animals and cold weather and stuff, who do you want as your leader to protect you in a group? Well, you want someone who's stronger than the adversary, the other tribe, the other animal. So strength becomes an ideal, an idol. We worship our ideals. Our ideals become our idols. And then those who embody the ideal become our idols. You were my idol. Your muscles were so this, you're this or this, you never did this, you had all this money, you had sex with 10 out of 10 girls in a chauvinistic metric. You were my idol. But where does this ideal come from? Well, it makes sense in certain environments. The environment that's killing a certain type of person and letting another type of person survive Warren Buffett is many people's ideal today. Unemotional, just sits there, reads his stocks day after day, never makes an emotional decision, and makes millions of dollars in a cult that values money more than human beings, in which if you want to be valued and valuable as a cult member, you have to ascend in the financial hierarchy, where there's only one richest person, and that's the thing. Who's the world's richest person? It's complete and utter nonsense. Do you think Elon Musk or Gates or Bezos, their life changes one iota by the last billion? I've got 158 billion. Oh, I've got 159. How many cups of coffee can you drink for the last billion? How many cups of coffee can you get in your body? It doesn't change anything, but oh my goodness. We're an insane cult who invents insane gods to make us look sane. Because if we idealize an insane sociopathic God that's just like us, then it seems to sanction our questionable, dubious protocols as a cult. And of the 9 or the 10,000 cults anthropologists estimate in human history, they were all right. Every single one of them. Over in Africa, where they're mutilating and cutting off clitorises with rusty knives. No doubt about it, this is the way to live. No doubt. You're ruining our cult. How dare you question our cult? And it's a fair point. You're busy cutting off the foreskins of young male penises. Where the fuck did you get that idea? There's no science supporting it. You're mutilating genitals over there, we're mutilating genitals over here, and we're both right. Stay out of this. We're right, you're wrong. Within chauvinism, there can only be one right answer. Absolute insanity. But if you question God, if you question the cult, you will be punished. You'll be cast out of the cult. Then where will you be? Well, you'll be in another cult. Another cult will take you in. Anyway, any cult is looking for members. You just have to fit into the insane stupidity of that particular cult in enough ways that they don't get anxious that you're different. Because all cults thrive on conformity, and that's their primary objective. And so the terror of all of this, because grown-ups cannot deal with this. What I'm saying here, it's hard to find a grown-up in any cult who can deal with this, because it's hard to find adults. You can find grown bodies, but you realize, despite understanding this, there's a 6-year-old inside of me that's afraid of being killed right now. Now, I can look at it and say, well, the odds are almost nothing. You're not going to die. But I'm afraid of being punished in a paradigm where the small one gets blamed and punished by the big one for the big one's mistakes. Because it's just like training a dog. If you, as a dog guardian, do not have the competence to know whether or not a dog can coexist in your life, because what? You're incompetent. You didn't study that. Among the many things your cult doesn't teach you is, are you suitable to be a pet owner or a guardian? You don't know how to train a dog. You're irresponsible. You don't have the discipline to follow up and do this and this and this. You don't know how to feed the dog. You don't know how to protect the dog. You don't know how to relate to the dog. So you create a violent, untrained, problematic animal by taking all of your incompetence and all of your ignorance and being the big one, the one that's in control, determining the feedback that that dog gets. And so this dog is barking at people, biting children, and you as the owner are frightened of being blamed. And maybe you're frightened of admitting that you don't know what you're doing. So you're mad at this dog. You stupid dog, get back here right now, this. And other people, of course, will blame you for this and that and the other. And the dog gets kicked because you didn't know what you're doing. And the exact same thing happens with children. You reward a child for screaming, you punish it for telling the truth, you abandon it when it needs you, you lie to it, you betray it, you traumatize it. You don't repair the trauma. You escalate the trauma into PTSD. You spend all of your money frivolously, you do this and this and the other, but then you tell your child to go and spend their money intelligently. They're not paying attention to your words. They're looking at what you're doing. You know, a child who depends on an adult and who can't survive on their own has to assume at a gut level that whatever the adult's doing works enough to keep them alive as an adult. And so I'm not following what you're saying, I'm following what you're doing. Because what you do is what you believe, not what you say. What you say is the thing that you believe will make you look good to say it. What you do is what you actually believe. And so every child follows the behavior of the giants around them because the giants around them control their lives. And the giants around them are still alive. And so there must be something competent in those giants. However incompetent, there must be something competent. If I copy the giants that are still living, my odds of survival seem to go up. So there's depression. There's also guilt and contrition and I'm never going to do it again. I won't be bad. But this, going back to this sympathy-antipathy thing, for life to create a new cult that's hopefully more intelligent than the last cult. Now there have been 10,000 cults in human history. 9,500 of them are dead. 9,500 of the cultures, the belief systems, the dogmas, the training mechanisms, the diets of peoples are dead. Meaning that's how much cults don't know what they're doing. Because if any of these cults which claim to be correct actually knew what they're doing, then you'd actually have a successful, happy cult in a state of grace. A state of grace is a state of living that consumes very little energy to create tremendously high yields of sustainable well-being. We're not in that environment. We're consuming vast amounts of energy and feeling terrified out of our skins, traumatized, frightened, miserable, depressed, lonely, angry, fearful. It's not a state of grace. Vast amounts of energy per capita to sustain chronic anxiety, suffering, misery. It's a state of insanity, not a state of grace. So there's this feeling. Now, the antipathy is essential for evolution. Someone has to say that's wrong. There's a better mousetrap. That's wrong. We don't need to spend 1 gallon for, an hour or 1 gallon a mile. We can do better than that. I'm sure we can get up to 5 miles a gallon. We can get up to 10 miles per gallon. No, that's sacrilegious. More than 10 miles can't be done. Can't fly. You see, the cult lays down these dogmas. This is the way of the world. People are meant to suffer. Get on with your life. Who said you're supposed to love your wife? Just stay married and shut up about it. The cult lays down these dogmas. And then some poor kid who hasn't learned the rules yet said, really? Is that it? That's so fucked up. Wham! The almighty deity, the fucked up parent, the fucked up God. Wham! How dare you question our authority? Well, don't you talk back to your parents. Don't do the... And, and so typically that child will cave in and become anxious, hurt, depressed, etc. But for life to continue, a few of these sincere children, these thinking people, we say we're going to teach you to learn to think. We don't teach you to think. If you thought, you would question every aspect of the government protocol, of the cultural protocol, of the educational protocol, of the workplace. You'd question it all. And you would accurately conclude that it is inefficient, that the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources is being transformed into human well-being is incredibly small. It's very inefficient. Now, how is life going to take an inefficient, dysfunctional system and make it into something that grows into something more that is sustainable? Well, it's got to iterate. It's got to deviate. It's got to mutate. It's got to diverge from the norm. All evolution occurs because some of nature's dandelion seeds are a little bit different. And they're a little bit different. Now, in any given environment, let's say here's the norm. This is 90 degrees. Now, this one is 94 degrees. This one is 88 degrees. So, or whatever. So, 90 degrees. Now, this is an object at a temperature. In a given environment, one temperature is going to have a slight benefit over another temperature. Now, nature doesn't necessarily, and life doesn't necessarily say which one it's going to be. It just says, we're going to take some of the pattern that works and we're going to deviate. We're going to mutate. We're going to try something different. And then, lo and behold, the dandelion seed that's at a slightly different temperature germinates faster. Or the dandelion seed that tolerates a higher range of temperature doesn't slow down and grows faster, so it seeds faster. So its children then take up the bare earth more than the one that started seeding a few weeks later. By the time the other one seeds, this one says, no, I've already got this space taken. And the mutation within the dandelion seed that is most successful for that environment flourishes. Now, nature doesn't say what is, nature doesn't judge. Nature doesn't say this is a good environment, this is a bad environment. It's just a fact that if a dandelion blows out in the desert and produces 1,000 dandelion seeds, and 5% of those seeds are better for growing in the desert than the other 95%. Those seeds statistically are going to grow more in the desert. And then they're going to have children, and 5% of its seeds are going to grow better in the desert than the other 95%. And so, and you wonder about the iteration of car alarms. Here we are, an entire neighborhood is alerted until someone can find their keys. That wasn't a car theft, by the way. That was an entire neighborhood disrupted because someone leaned on a window or something. And we thought that was a good idea, to spend several $100s to interrupt many quiet moments like this. And that's the state of evolution we're in today. So we're going to take a break as we kind of look at some of these things. But the psyche and reality is fractal in nature. If you follow a fractal pattern, if you watch an image generator of a fractal pattern, you will see repeated themes over and over again, and you go deeper and deeper into the detail, and you start to see the whole exists in that entire detail. You just need enough zoom. If we zoom enough into one individual, we understand the whole cult. If we zoom in enough to understand the whole cult, we understand the evolution of 10,000 cults on this planet alone, and counting, most of which are now extinct. We understand the process by which a cult comes into being and the process by which a cult becomes extinct. We can understand how the deification and dogma within a cult leads to its death. That once you decide that tall, brawny men are the be-all and end-all just because we're not thinking, we now move into an information age where if you have vast muscles, it just means when you get frustrated, you break your keyboard more easily. It doesn't mean that you, logged a forest more efficiently. The efficient loggers are using heavy equipment to begin with. So you're much better if you've got a peripheral view of thought and good control of your fingers than if you're 6'8" and weigh 250 pounds and have to stomp around and buy special clothing at high prices and bang your head on the ceiling. So as the environment changes, what is idealized needs to change. If it doesn't, then we die. As 95% of all cults, statistically speaking, are destined to die. Because when a cult forms an identity around its dogma, sorry dogs for the insult, but when a cult forms a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being around its dogmatic ideals, its idols, then you have a dead cult. Because reality and evolution, reality around us is always changing. If we don't change, we get out of sync. We move out of grace as we become attached to a fixed identity that has nothing to do with the underlying efficiency of transforming energy into sustainable well-being in the new and ever-changing environment.